Thank you for having me today. It is both an honor and a pleasure to get to speak with you today. Some of you I know in the room today, and a lot of you don't know my story. And so it's going to be exciting to share my story with you. Often there's a lot of visitors that visit the women's shelter. And often you hear the story of the woman as the victim and as the visitor at the shelter. But there are many other visitors at the shelter. Many of them are small little people, often the forgotten victims, the voiceless victims, the ones that have no say, the ones that have no choice for visiting the women's shelter. And today I'm here to talk to you about that little person, the little person that's been traumatized, that's been displaced from their home, that's confused, that don't really know why mama's been beaten, why mama's dragging them from place to place, why daddy's so angry. And so I'm here to talk to you from a child's perspective about domestic violence. You often hear the woman's perspective on talk shows. You've seen books about it. You hear about it on television. You read about it in the newspaper. But today, I want you to hear it from a child who's witnessed it to the most tragic end. No one knows what happens behind the closed doors of someone else's home. However, the little child does. They hear the screams from the other room. They hear their mommy crying, "Stop, please. Stop, you're hurting me." And then their adrenaline starts to flow, and their self-defense mechanism starts kicking in, and they run to the rescue of their mother, only to be caught up in the middle of the rage and the anger, to be backhand slapped, caught up in that the crossfires between mommy and daddy, or either sent to their room. Either way, they leave damaged. They go off to their room and they begin to imitate that violence. They start to play for their lives. Whether they start to act out on their toys, their stuffed animals, or like I did with my baby dolls. It's kind of embarrassing to say, but I began to cut as young as 3 years old, which I couldn't believe I could remember as far as 3 years old. I had to go back and ask my mother, "Mom, was we in our new house? When did we move to our new house?" And she reconfirmed, we didn't move to our new house until I was 4 years old. So I remember as early as 3 years old beginning to cut my baby doll's hair, drown my baby doll in the toilet, and pluck the heads off of my baby dolls while my dad was in the other room beating my mother to no end. I had a bunch of headless baby dolls. That's pretty bad. But these little children, the things that their little eyes have seen, the things that their little ears have heard, so damaging. They shouldn't have to go through that. But yet they do. And they have no voice, no say. Should mommy stay or should mommy go? No voice. They're so impressionable. They say that a child's self-esteem and personality is developed by the time they're 6 years old. But my mother was being beaten before she was even conceiving me and my brother. It started with the words that you're ugly, you're not worthy, no one else will want you, which is all lies. Lies that was poisonous, that was starting to tear down her self-esteem, which is what abusive spouses do. They start to tear down your self-esteem so that they could take control of you, to break you down. We all know what domestic violence is or abuse is. It starts with taking control of your mind. It's like venom from a snake. It's a slow poisonous process that flows through your body and takes over. And then it leads to the physical aspects which the abuse, the physical abuse, begins. But then it's bad when children gets involved. It's pretty bad when the little people have to witness this, because it becomes a vicious cycle. What are you teaching the little girls? That is acceptable for your daughter to be in a relationship where abuse is acceptable? It's okay for your daughter to let a man hit her or abuse her? Is that okay? Do any of y'all want your daughters to think that that's all right? That's functional? Or is it all right for your son to beat his wife or beat his girlfriend? Or is it okay for him to allow his girlfriend to beat him and abuse him, or verbally abuse him and tear him down and take his self-esteem away? Well, that's kind of what me and my brother got caught up in. However, my brother really didn't get to that point. My brother never really got to know who my father was. By the time I was 6 years old, I began calling the policemen. And I don't know if we have law enforcement in here, but if you recall, about 20 years ago, there was really no women's shelter that you could run and seek refuge at. And policemen really didn't have any say if they came to the house and they came to the door and the man stepped outside. They said, look, everything's okay. We don't need your help here. He was turned away and he was left to go. However, my father, he was a hard worker, well known in the community. He was a good citizen. And so when they came, after I called the policeman, he said everything was all right. And so they thought, okay, everything is okay. In addition, they weren't going to ruin his reputation. They weren't going to risk that. And so they turned around, they left, yet I was there left to get beat, and my mother beaten even more for allowing me to get on the phone to call the cops, which was even more damaging. The people that you think that you can call to come and save you, you couldn't even seek refuge in that. And you had those nights where you waited for him to fall asleep and to tiptoe out of the house to seek refuge, to get safety. I remember those nights that we tiptoed out of the house with the basket loaded. We pretended to do laundry that day just so we could sneak out of the house that night to get away. But then I remember the nights he'd come knocking on my grandmother's windows, begging us to leave and promising he'd never do it again. Oh, he would let her have a baby. He'd let her have another baby. He'd never hit her again. And she would cry and cry, no, I can't go through this again. But she would go back again, only to be beaten again, only to be beaten again. The cycle would just repeat and never end. It's one thing I've learned is you can't walk that fence. If they do not seek help, you do not go back. You do not walk that fence with them, because it's more damaging. You only empower them more when you do that. I had been left with lifelong scars at the point of 6 years old. A cycle that I would have to work for many years to break. Many years. After 10 years of abuse that my mother endured, she finally found the strength to pick up her 2 children and leave that place of violence and take her 2 children with the help of God. But unfortunately, after several months of enduring a separation and him begging her to come back, he felt the loss of power and control, and he drove 45 miles, still not being able to control his rage, and put a gun to her head and shot my mother, and then took his life with my little brother in a car seat and me 8 years old, not considering that he would leave us behind, passing on that baton of pain